I mean, one of the points you made on Best Damn League Show was that the if T1 had been a European team and won, they were not staying together again. Although I also think if they'd have come second as well the year before, they wouldn't have stayed together again.
Yeah, I mean, I think our ecosystem, I mean, we're probably getting a little bit ahead in terms of topic, but the European, I would say the Western ecosystem of League of Legends specifically is a very immature, because it has been seeking its own identity the last 10 years and losing it through the process of finding it. The more you try to look what you should be doing, and the further away from what you should do you're doing. And if you look like NA, I think that the complex of NA, of not accepting to be just the region it is, has destroyed the region.
Okay.
Instead of saying, you know, guys, we're probably not the best. We probably don't have the best player base. We probably don't have the best systems. But instead of doing like what Vietnam or Japan does, which is like producing one or two decent teams that try to go for the upset, this heuristic belief that this region, because it's big and rich, should be able to compete, and trying to kind of retro-engineer what the Korean or the Europeans are doing ahead of them, and trying to integrate it like as a raw thing. You just take a block from elsewhere and putting it, and not having an endemic solution on like how do we want to produce gameplay in League of Legends, has destroyed the region. Like you look at the current state of NALCS, and there is some coaches and people that I do know that are very clever about the game, but I really feel like the region has started from a blank page for like 7 years in a row. And in Europe, we are slowly but steadily following that slope, where we are trying to retro-engineer once again what Korea and China is doing, instead of trying to breed a playstyle of League of Legends that caters to our culture. And so we're losing ourselves during this process.
Mm. I think that's a really good point. I'm just as you're talking, I'm thinking it's almost like in the last few years, with the increase in the money and the budget and teams and all that kind of thing, people have had more staff and maybe more kind of coaching time. But actually, with that, they've just been doing kind of more analysis of what the best teams in the world do, and we end up copying them more and more. I mean, we can get on to actually, I'll just skip around because there's loads of stuff there we can talk about. You were talking in a recent video about how SK found their identity, but then lost it, in the game against G2. And everyone in this region just, I mean, you said it there, like in the process of trying to find our identity, we've lost it. Can you explain that a little bit more? Like, what was our identity before and what have we got to now? Because, I mean, the very surface level thing is just, I remember when going to Worlds, the first week of Worlds was the best for EU because we were ahead of everyone else, and then everyone would copy EU. Suddenly, everyone else is playing Aatrox like before the rework. And if we were going to do anything of their ever deep runs, it was going to be by doing something different. Whereas now, the first week of LEC is the same as the first 3 weeks, but the second week looks so different because we're all just playing what they did in LCK, and it was like we waited until the LCK games before we were told what we were allowed to play. And so how do you see that beyond just the surface level with suddenly just copying champions?
I mean, SK, for instance, is a team that has been built around the idea that Niski is a playmaking in a sense of like, he's almost game making player. Like he creates events in the game, like naturally. Like a game is more eventful when you have Niski because he's just eager to play a suboptimal laning phase to make sure he always have the ability to move around the map and bring this man up on the opponent to force them to make a decision that's gonna get them outside of their comfort zone, right? If you look at the first game of SK, they've always tried to make sure that their jungle smashes mid with Niski to the point where enemy mid laner will have to respect Niski's options, and then they will immediately transfer that to the bot side of the map, and trying to deny as much as they can from the enemy bot for their support to connect. Because once DOS and Isma work together and Niski can move with them, then SK starts to be the team we know. The problem is yes, I know that the meta has changed, and we've seen kind of a slowing down of the game, especially with the rise of a pick such as Corki that prevents like Azir and Corki they are very, very terrible picks in terms of design because they just slow down the pace of a game with extraordinary wave clear, extraordinary scaling, pretty decent laning. And on top of that, they have a huge range and poke, meaning they invalidate a lot of the siege that you want to have on them. And if you can't siege on League of Legends 1, 2, 3, 4 waves, and you can just wave clear, it just naturally extends the time of the game. And they are very extremely good champion later. And I think that SK is trying to embrace that, thinking, oh, this is the most like efficient tactic available. The truth is, SK now ends up with Corki, Xayah, Rakan. So there is no point for a Corki to be like Corki by nature will never be able to win the 2v2 mid jungle. Like no matter you put Faker, you put Prime Chovy, like the best version of Chovy ever anyone's, you will get 5-6 years ahead. You'll get a good trade. Maybe you get a recall up on your opponent, but that's about it. So then the game becomes very stale, and then I don't think SK is that great at team fighting. I don't think SK is like phenomenal at skirmishing. I don't think that they play the vision and the lines of vision in a very disciplined way, the way BDS does or the way T1 is doing in Korea. What they have for themselves is if they have the lead and their bot lane is ahead and Niski moves toward the bot lane, they usually end up winning more fights than not. And what's very frustrating for me as a region is you saw it. You've seen G2 going to Worlds, playing Maokai, invading enemy Gromp on the first wave and diving with Draven, and beat Weibo, the finalist of the tournament. And you've seen G2 play Ornn, Azir, Xayah, and get smashed by NA. Players that, by the way, people were making fun of, right? I was coaching these players, so I know that the Europeans were making fun of these players, saying they're bad and stuff. But the truth is, stick to your guns. That's the only way. Like, you're not gonna go to a chess player and say, oh, you know what? Like, this guy has insane theory. Like, he has like 60 or 7 move or 100 moves of prep on his openings. Don't play the openings. Make the game chaotic. Play the finals to try to find someone else. Like, you're not like that basic Sun Tzu, you know? It's like, if the enemy is strong, if he has the uphill somewhere, try to fight downhill. You're not gonna try to fight. I mean, who they were playing against? I think it was KC, and the next day was
G2
SK
KC,
was against BDS. So are you gonna send, if it were troops, right? If SK were like actual field troops and they were on a war, would you say Exakik, Niski, Isma, we have 5 archer on the top of his hill, and you're just gonna run at them and try to kill them? No. Obviously not, because it seems to be dumb. That's the same thing in League of Legends. Like you're gonna lose because by nature BDS is a team that just does extremely well if they can control vision. So by playing the slow game, you're just gonna walk on worlds and you're gonna lose the game. And I feel like we take the example of SK, but I can take many examples during the last day of the LEC, and that's why I mentioned that in my video, where I get slightly frustrated because I feel like it's not a big deal, right? It's winter split. It's just, it shows, it's a very good stigma of what NA was doing wrong, what G2 did wrong during Worlds, what T1 kind of did wrong until they came to quarterfinals and were like, we're gonna impose our win condition, what JDG tried to do. You see that every single team, like we have enough data now, right? We were speaking about traditional sports, we had a lot of data. We do not control the change of the game. Riot does. But what we've seen is over the years, teams that try to betray their identity to try to play what's the most efficient available end up losing. So maybe you got to find another pick. Maybe you have to get something that's probably a 7 out of 10 in lane. That's probably not the best. Maybe you're going to have to be half an item down. Maybe you're going to have to trade off something to be able to play your playstyle. But what's certain is if you try to play the Corki Xayah game and your name is SK Gaming, I don't see you go very far.
I think it's really
Sorry,
good. I mean,
monologue.
no, it's really good. I always ended up with like 5 different questions, but I'll just touch on a few of the things you mentioned. Firstly, I think the chess analogy is absolutely perfect. For anyone who wants to explore this a bit more, there's a documentary called Magnus. I think it's just called Magnus. That's about his first World Championship win, where he's playing against Vishy Anand, and Vishy's very famous for, he was one of the first players to really start working with a computer in a very effective way. And so it is exactly that. It's this young kid versus like 10 different analysts who's going to be really prepared in the opening. And the games he won were the games where like, okay, fine, like I'm just going to do things that are suboptimal opening theory, but now we're both just playing the game and you're no longer playing on your, just from your
Textbook,
book.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, and I also T1 is a perfect example that I hadn't really thought of. That's exactly what they did at Worlds. It's like they've been playing this, you know, Prio bot is the most valuable thing for every draft. We'll play whatever it takes to get that. If it's Caitlyn, Callista, whatever. Then when it gets nerfed, they kind of go to a few other things, and they looked fine. They didn't look great. And then as soon as they start playing their style again, they just force it, even if it's, you know, suboptimal. But suboptimal is such a crazy thing because we talk about suboptimal maybe mathematically, but it's not about what's optimal for anyone other than you.